Welcome to another episode of the Itty Bitty Podcast. This week on the show, we talk about something near and dear to my heart. My guest is Andrew from the podcast Pop Anime Comics Lounge, and we sat down to talk about everything from the change in culture at Comic-Con, how comic books have affected current media, and we even talked about speculating and investing in toys and comics. This was my first remote interview, and Andrew was nice enough to come on and geek out with me. But remember, this is not a podcast about comic books. It's the Itty Bitty Podcast. It's anything but, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Itty Bitty Podcast. It's the Itty Bitty Podcast. It's the Itty Bitty Podcast. The Itty Bitty Podcast.
All right, well, welcome to another episode of the Itty Bitty Podcast. My guest this week is Andrew from Pop Anime Comics Lounge. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's good to be here. I'm excited, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. This is actually the first episode where we're going to talk about, comic books and comic culture and stuff like that. So I'm pretty excited to do that with you here today.
I'm excited to talk about it. Let's lay it on. Any questions? I'm ready to field them.
So I guess we should start because you have a podcast, Pop Anime Comics Lounge. So I guess let's start with your podcast. We'll start with that and kind of go from there. So what's this podcast all about?
So I'm going to preface it. I have a website called popanimecomics.com, and I write about anime comics and pop culture. And then I was doing written interviews with voice actors and comic writers. And then I figured that nobody wants to read anymore, or people want to read, but people like to listen and they like to do other activities. And so I created a podcast where I interview voice actors, wrestlers, comic writers, artists, and cosplayers, and the occasional author every once in a while that I find interesting, and that's what I do. So I just ask questions, we have a conversation, they say whatever they want to say, and it's always fun, and I interview people that I like. So I'm a fan of certain shows, I'm a fan of certain wrestlers, and the whole entire thing behind this is that I created a podcast because I want to speak to certain people. And so I want to speak to certain people, I want to enjoy certain people, and what I've learned is that what I like, people also like. And so that's kind of how everything goes, and it's usually 45 minutes to about an hour. I talk to these people, and we go from there. And we talk about everything, their careers, con culture. Sometimes they have funny stories to tell, and it's just a blast to do it. And I thoroughly enjoy it, and apparently a lot of other people do as well.
Yeah, I was checking out some of your different interviews. You've got everybody from cosplayers to wrestlers to, I saw you had an interview with Kevin Eastman on there. So yeah, you seem to be all over the comic culture.
Yeah, I'm all over the place, and things come about, and it's crazy because a lot of these people, so I've had people like Paul Levitz, who ran DC Comics for almost 15 years, as like their head publisher and then as the president of the company, and then you have somebody like Kevin Eastman, and they're from two different walks of life, very successful people, and these people you would think would be inaccessible, but it's crazy. And this is something I'm going to encourage everybody, is that a lot of people in the comic world, the anime world, the cosplay world, and even the professional wrestling world are very accessible, and it's crazy to think that, you get to talk to some of the best, because everybody knows the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Everybody knows, for those who don't know, Paul Levitz was kind of responsible behind Batman Begins, and he was sort of on set for some of that because that was during his reign and towards the end of his reign as a DC Comics president. And so it's crazy to think that all these people are very accessible, and they're very nice too about it.
Right, you would be kind of intimidated asking somebody for an interview like that if it was maybe some other type of industry. But yeah, comic book people are just a lot more approachable, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy where some of them are. Some of them
So,
are not. Some of them are just horrible people.
right.
And some of them are just not nice, and some of them are nasty. But a lot of them are just nice people, and they want to talk to you. Especially the older they get, the nicer they become.
Right.
Because somebody like Paul Levitzer, I did Denny O'Neil, who was behind the killing of Jason Todd, for those who don't know. The big red phone call where you had to actually pay back in the day to use your phone. Now that's sort of free for the most part. And so Denny is up there. I think Denny's in his late 70s, early 80s at this point, and a lot of these older people want to talk because there's the new kid on the block, and there's nothing wrong with Scott Snyder, who's young, but he's getting a lot of attention. And if you wrote Batman 30 years ago, people, you're not forgotten, but you're also not in the spotlight anymore. And
Right.
so older people want to talk, and they want to say, oh yeah, I remember those good old days, and I remember when I wrote this and I redefined the industry. And they like to tell those stories, and I like to capture that. And even with somebody like Howard Cruz and talking about comic culture, there's a whole plethora. For those who don't know, Howard Cruz is the founder slash leader and one of the central figures of the gay comics movement. And
Okay.
he actually was one of the people that got gay comics into the mainstream. And DC Comics took a big risk on him. That doesn't get attention. And I got to interview him very early on. And so talking about that, and that's a whole nother comic culture. And I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but the 20-minute interview I had with him is an amazing interview because we're going through stuff and he talks about some exclusive material that actually hasn't been dictated and hasn't been really discussed out in the comic world with his book Stuck Rubber Baby. And so there's so many factions of comic culture that people don't even realize, whether you're talking about horror comic culture or gay comic culture or when Japanese meets American style. And when you have things like My Hero Academia, which is on the anime side, and where that originated with Astro City and all that stuff. So it's amazing. It's really an amazing industry. And when you start talking to all these people, you really get into that. And you get into like the nitty-gritty stuff. And that's what I like to do.
Right. Find out more about like what drives the stories and that type of deal. How long have you been going to cons?
Oh, I started going to cons maybe when I was 15 on the anime side.
Okay.
And then I got into some Comic Con stuff more recent, probably within the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
Because I'm new to comics. I mean, I'm new to the idea of collecting single issues. I've been collecting single issues for only about 7 years. I've been reading a lot of graphic novels since I
Okay.
was 12, and I've been into anime since I was 7. So
Right.
I came in the other way. I came in on the anime side first. And
Okay.
then I got into the comic side with like the Teen Titans and all that stuff. And then I got into comic collecting as far as single issues and getting CGC stuff and really experiencing con culture when I was more in college. So I kind
Okay.
of went the backwards way in.
Yeah, I started with TV in the 90s, and I was more in. I read comics when I was younger, but then I got away from it. But I was big into the Batman TV show, and I used to watch even the older, like the old Batman. I would watch Sailor Moon before school. I watched all types of different older shows that were all parts of different comic book culture. But it was kind of what I was raised on, and then as I got older. I've just recently started to get back into actual comic books as I've, gotten a little bit older. I have a little bit more time on my hand, a little bit more money, and now I'm starting to put money back into my comic book collection. So it's pretty wild to see where comics have come and where they're going. So
See, that's interesting to me because a lot of people actually don't understand that anime culture and comic culture are cousins. They are
mhm.
very much similar, and part of that is, and I'll tell a story. Paul Levitz was explaining it on my podcast. For those who want to listen to it, it's at the end of that episode. But what he was saying is, and I'm a big Osamu Tezuka fan as well, and I've come across this in my research, is back in the 70s and 80s, comics really weren't doing all that great. Where there were stories and things really weren't connecting, and they were connecting very minimally as far as things, and there was an issue of how to repackage it. And manga started coming into stores like Barnes and Noble and Borders Books and other stores like that. And manga was a way to repackage and actually was the predecessor to the graphic novel. The graphic novel in the comic world is a very new concept. And in many ways, it actually saved the comic industry because people want 6 issues. And I personally, right now, I'm actually taking a break from single issues and I'm actually going through graphic novels because I want more of a story. It's also cheaper. I'm also buying these like nice 18 collective issues from Image that just came out on a lot of books. And I want more of a story versus just a single issue. But manga, due to Osamu Tezuka and others Osamu Tezuka, for those who don't know, is the godfather of anime, really helped to save the comic industry because graphic novels do bolster sales and people want more of a story. And you have a lot of kids right now, 13-year-olds and 15-year-olds, who are not collecting single issues, but they're actually collecting graphic novels. And their first comic experience is a graphic novel. And they're actually coming up to people at cons saying, oh, yeah, I really enjoyed your work. And they're plopping down a trade paperback versus a single issue. And
Right.
that's becoming more and more of the norm at con culture. And while it's not fully there, and what I mean by the norm, I probably shouldn't have said norm, but maybe that's 2% right now of the industry, where 10 years ago that was non-existent. And graphic novels have been around since the 90s,
Okay.
and there's a reason why a lot of stuff is getting republished. I have a copy of the Judas Contract by Marv Wolfman and George Perez, which is Teen Titans. That book is 2 years old, and it's a hardcover, but that was published 2 years ago, and that story is 40 years old.
Right.
It's 30, 40 years old. I'm not exactly sure the exact date. It's 80s, and I'm horrible at math. I think, yeah, it's probably 40 years old right now because 81, I think it came out, or 82,
Yeah.
if my math is
Yeah,
correct.
it's about 40.
And we're almost in, yeah, it's in that range. So that's what con culture is changing into, and it's just fascinating.
What do you said you were reading graphic novels right now. That's what you've been on. What have you been reading lately?
So I just fell in love with Polar.
Okay.
So I love Victor Santos. I love anything the guy touches is fantastic. He's just so good at what he does. And so I actually am reading the graphic novel format. So I'm reading Polar. I just finished The Black Kaiser and I actually just wrote about it for my website. And I just dropped about $75 legitly 2 hours ago as of the this podcast, which is August 27th. For reference point here, I just dropped $75 to buy the other 4 volumes on Barnes and Noble 2 hours ago,
Nice.
and I'm looking forward to talking about that. And
I
reading
haven't
about
read that,
and
but
then-
I've checked out the Netflix movie.
Oh, the Netflix movie was so good too. It's so
Yeah.
good. It was so well done, and it was really really good, and they did a good job with that. And then following that, um, I'm now actually reading. While I'm waiting for that, I'm reading Anthony Bourdain's Hungry Ghosts,
Oh, okay.
which is sort of horror, Japanese-ish style, very much more abstract is the way I describe it. And then I actually just went to Barnes & Noble 3 days ago, picked up Paper Girls, the first 18 issues in a nice bound edition, and Monstrous, a nice 18 issue cover of that. And then in a few days, I'm probably going to pick up the rest of Saga that just came out, if they have the compendium. Even though I've read Saga and I'm up to date with Saga, I just want to reread Saga again from the start because I think it's been out for like a year and a half now, and they're planning the back half of it. And so
Yeah.
I just want to reread it to see if I missed anything because it's really a beautiful thing. And then I just got a whole stack of like Earth 1 stuff and Spider-Gwen stuff, and then I want to read Cyborg 009. So I got a whole list of things to read, and then anything that fancies me is where I'm at as far as that. But my main goal right now is I'm in the middle of Hungry Ghosts, and it's a fun one to read, but it's very abstract. And so anybody who's reading wants something that is not in the box, I recommend Hungry Ghosts because it's so abstract and it's so outside the box.
You said Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah,
Is he involved?
did
Was he involved?
Yeah, he's the writer with Actually, I have it like right next to me. It's Anthony Bourdain's Hungry Ghosts,
It's not like
and
Anthony Bourdain, the chef guy,
oh
right?
no, yeah,
Is
it's
that
him.
Anthony
It's him.
Bourdain?
Yeah, he
Oh
wrote
wow.
another one before this one,
Oh okay.
actually, and there's actually recipes that he has in this book, and it's like a really nice book. It's got like a little ribbon tassel in it, and it's a $15 graphic novel done by Dark Horse, and it's really an interesting book, and I think it's really cool, and it also has like I'm going through it. You have Sebastian Cabral, you have Caprino, Vanessa Del Rey is in this book. Irene Koch, who did the Korra stuff, the Korra graphic novel that just came out, she has a story in this. So you got a bunch of artists. It's
Nice.
really interesting.
I haven't heard of that. I'm gonna have to check it out.
Yeah, it's done by Dark Horse, and it's really cool. And there's about
Dark
5 new
Horse.
recipes that
Okay.
he designed specifically for this graphic novel.
So sweet. So you can chef it up while you read some comics.
Yeah. It's really cool, and it's interesting, and it is a horror thing. And I guess the tagline, the way to sell it is that playing with your food never was so scary.
Oh, nice. Have you read or have you heard of No One Left to Fight? Have you seen that book yet?
I have the first issue.
I have it too. I haven't read it yet though. I've got it.
I don't know. I don't know which variant I have because I think there's 3 variants,
Yeah,
and I haven't read it either. But it looks fun.
it looks amazing. Yeah, it looks. I was a big Dragon Ball fan. I watched a lot of Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball GT. I haven't watched any of the Dragon Ball Super. I got to catch up on Dragon Ball Super. But it's supposed to be, I guess, in that kind of that style. So it's like, the idea is that there's no one left to fight, and what do these heroes do when there's no one left to do battle with? So I have that one on my list of ones that I want to read soon. So I just figured, since we were talking about anime, that's kind of a nice cross up between the two.
So I'll be honest. I picked it up because it looked interesting, but I also had a sense, because I am a comic collector, that it would be worth money.
Yeah,
And I have a feeling I'm going to make some good money on it. I don't think it's going to get me rich.
right,
My Saga 1 will get me rich
right.
because I have that thing CBCS signed by Fiona Staples and Brian K. Vaughan.
And they just
So,
got something greenlit for Saga too, didn't they? There's some movie or series or something coming for Saga. Did I hear that?
so the second half of Saga is going to be 54 issues. So the compendium, for all those who are curious, the compendium is Saga Part 1. The reason why it's coming out in a compendium is that the first 54 issues are that. And then Fiona Staples and Brian K. Vaughan they're doing another 54 issues, and at 108 it's done. I don't know if there's going to be a TV show. At one point they said they weren't going to do one. They
Right,
didn't want to. They own it outright. Both of them own it. And I think BK Vaughan doesn't want to do it. And just because I think they want to leave Saga alone. Also, Saga is one of Image's top-selling books, and with The Walking Dead gone,
right,
I don't know what Image is going to do with that because it's a new era for Image with that. But there is going to be another 54 issues that are
right.
coming. It's just when, and that's the key. But Saga Compendium 1 is a big deal because it definitely got out to comic shops a week before, and then it's supposed to be in comic shops maybe tomorrow, August 28th. But Amazon's saying it might take a month or two for it to ship out. So there's a lot of complications on what's happening with that, but it's still a big deal because most books don't get compendiums out of
Right.
Image. Personally, I think that I have a Saga, the first 18 issues, in a nice hardcover issue, and then there's book 2 and book 3. I'd rather have it in hardcover from my own standard because it looks nicer on a shelf. But the compendium is $40. It's the fastest way how to catch up on Saga.
Yeah. Yeah, I do the compendium sometimes when I'm really behind on stuff. You touched on something I wanted to, it's kind of a good segue. You talked about variants, and then you also, talked about a little bit about speculating. So I do a little bit of speculating myself, not enough to become a millionaire or anything like that. I just kind of buy the books I like and the ones that I think are going to make a little bit of money. But I do notice that there's a lot of variance. And so I just wanted to see if you had any opinions on the state of variance these days with, shops pushing out all types of variants and everybody wants an exclusive. But if there's, 30 variants of one book, it's kind of hard to get something that's going to be rare.
Ooh, this is good. This is good. This is a good question because this is a good topic for me. So I'm going to preface something before we even deal with this, and I promise it'll come full circle. I run a panel called Comic Book Investing 101 at cons. And the whole point of what I talk about is comic books and investing, and it's a very intro level course into that where I budget, we go through signatures, we go through CGC, and all that type of stuff. The thing that I actually don't touch upon due to time constraints is variance. So every time I do this panel at cons, I'm going to redirect to this segment.
Right.
Complete discretion, making it obvious. So my opinion on variance is that it depends what company's doing it. Zenscope is an amazing company for variance. They actually have limits to how many numbers there are. So I just bought 2 Zenscope covers for $50 for 2, and it was the Starbucks ones. One of them is 350 copies are out there. Another one is 250 copies. So Zenscope has very limited capacity, and those were the ECCC covers because Starbucks is located in Seattle, Con was in Seattle, and then Zenscope does a lot with that, with all these comic conventions. So that, in that sense, is that it's more rare. So if a company is willing to limit itself, then it makes complete sense, because if there's only 250 copies and there's bound to be an error percentage of 3 copies not being 9.8s,
right?
3% of that, then you have something exclusive and it's wanted. There's a reason why 2 comic covers that would have cost probably about $40 wound up selling for about $55.
Right.
That makes sense. But then when you have a Midtown comic, Detective Comics 1000 is the best example for this. I believe there was, I think, 50 or 60 different comic variants across the board with Detective Comics. Mm-hmm. And there was 10 just in the original set, going through the 80 years, the regular cover and the blank cover, from my understanding. So you had 10 of them. Marvel 1000 is the exact same way. You have the regular set. Then you have all these other sets where then every comic shop wants its own version. Midtown Comics, Third Eye Comics, and then the list can go on. Those are the 2 big ones that I can think off the top of my head. But then you have online companies. So it really becomes down to the artist, because a J. Scott Campbell will fetch money to some degree. But even then, look at J. Scott Campbell with all of his variants. Originally, when J. Scott Campbell was doing stuff, he had maybe 12 to 15 variants a year that came out. And that's why J. Scott Campbell was special, because it was limited to that degree, and you knew that maybe he was only going to have 15 variants, and maybe there was going to be 15,000 of them at the most out there. And that's why the SpiderMan 700 and Superior SpiderMan connecting covers with Midtown are so valuable, because it was a low print run. Right. But now, J. Scott Campbell has every month, he has 20 variants that come out. That means, if we're doing our math right, that's 240 variants at a minimum. A J. Scott Campbell isn't exclusive anymore.
Right.
It's common. And while people want it, if you go on eBay right now, people are selling J. Scott Campbells, and a lot of them aren't selling through. The ones that are selling through are the ones like his Walking Dead version that he did with Michonne. That cover is selling through in the sketch version of it. I was lucky. I have one of those, so I'm a little biased on that. But that one is sought after because it is limited. It was a drawback. It was random. He just did a cover for Aspen that if you spend $25 in their store, you got it for free, and that's a limited of 250. That one will sell through because it's limited. But as far as variants go, things aren't, they're becoming common now.
Right.
It's the only variants that are great is when it's a blank cover that's limited to 3,000, or it's a variant that's limited to 3,000 copies. Those I think have money, or a Delato has value, especially, and then also variants get fun when there's a low print run. So I don't know how, if people know print runs or anything, or do you want me to explain that?
You can explain
Really
a little
quickly?
bit, yeah. Yeah, we kind of go over a bunch of different topics on this show, so yeah, go ahead and explain.
Hopefully I'm not rambling on and people are interested still, but a print run means how many books are being produced for that specific comic that month. So if a comic the previous month did very well, they might increase the print run. If a comic did bad, they might keep it at the same print run, or they might lower it. Number ones have high print runs. Number two sometimes have high print runs, but then a number six might have a low print run.
Right.
And so what starts to happen is that if you have a low print run, but then you have Delato who does a 1 in 100 ratio, so that means for every regular 100 comics are out there, there's 100 special 100 variant out there. And then, because there's a very famous issue, and it's Spider-Man, I think like 524, I want to say, or 512, where Spider-Man only had like 15 or 16,000 comics being produced in that range for that month. And Delato did a 1 in 100 variant. And this is maybe like 15, 20 years ago. And so he did a 1 in 100. So there isn't that many of them out there. And those variants are very valuable because they don't come to market because people understand that you can't find this. And if you do find it, you're expected to pay anywhere from $900 to $1,500 raw. And if it's graded, you could be spending up to $2,250 for it very
Right.
easily. So in those circumstances with variants, then yes, that makes complete sense. So if a comic has a very low run, then it makes complete sense. It would be shoot up, or if a shop says we're doing only 300 of these or 3,000 of these, and that's it, which sometimes happens also, then it has value. But if it's a finite amount, or you have a plethora of 30 options, because Dynamite does this with Red Sonja a lot too, or Vampirella. Red Sonja and Vampirella do this a lot too, where they have all these variants, and so that's what happens. And so I mean, it's so complicated, and it just, things are becoming less valuable, and the only reason why they're doing it is because they want to sell more comics, and the margins on comics are so thin.
Right. So I guess we can switch gears a little bit and talk
Sorry
a
for
little bit
rambling.
about maybe toys. Are you seeing a similar trend as far as pop culture toys are going to?
Why don't we just say the one toy that we all know we're thinking about? There's only one toy that we're all thinking about right now that has this going for it.
I don't know
And
which
that's
one you're
Pop
talking
Funkos.
about. Which
It's
toy are we
Pop
thinking?
Funkos. That's it. Pop
Wh-
Funkos are
Pop
like
Funkos, yeah. Oh, yeah. But I feel like those aren't really that valuable just because there's so many of them now. And
bullshit.
I mean,
Bullshit.
yeah, I guess if you get a good exclusive though, right?
Okay, so I'll come clean. I sell on eBay Pop Funkos.
Okay.
And if you know the right ones, and I'll go through a list of some of the ones that are valuable, anything anime, typically that's an exclusive, will do well on eBay. And so anything, San Diego just happened. Asuka Langi just came out of Neon Genesis Evangelion. That thing is money in the bank. Ruby is money in the bank. Harry Potter Pop Funkos are money in the bank. Dragon Ball Z is iffy, but sometimes they can be worth good money, depending on the right ones. And typically anything from New York Comic Con, whether you go to Hot Topic, GameStop, Target, FYE, the shared exclusives. Usually Harry Potter, Barnes& and Noble's usually good too for that. Those typically are good money. So on average with my Harry Potter pops that I collect and sell, I'm getting anywhere from $35 to 45, and sometimes I get 50, and those are $15 a piece. And so I've been selling on eBay for about 8 months. I've been collecting pops for probably the last 5 years, and of the Harry Potter and some of the anime stuff, I've done rather well, and I've gotten anywhere from 2.5 to 3x. And on a lot of my pops, I wind up getting anywhere from 2.5 rate of return to 3x, and sometimes I get a 5 times rate of return, depending on
Right.
the pop. And most of them are $15 pops. So they are worth serious money, and pound for pound, they might be worth more money than comics graded
I didn't know
at
that.
the moment.
I didn't think that they were that. I mean, I knew that they were sought after, but I'm out here in Washington. I haven't been to. They have that big. It's like not a factory. I guess it's their store, their main headquarters there in Everett, Washington. That's a little bit of a hike for me, but I have to get out there and check it out. It looks amazing.
Funko is a fascinating company. They went public, I think, 2 years ago. So they are a publicly traded company. Their IPO was at $9. Their stock right now is sitting at 22.
And they
So if you
started
bought in
small, right? Very small, right?
Funko's been around since 1998.
But when
I'm
they started,
actually
he started super small, huh?
I guess. I mean, the craziest thing, I'm actually working on a panel and I'm trying to get it into an anime con called Funko Investing 101. There's a trend going on with me in investing in these things. And
No, I've been
so,
comic book speculating and stuff, so this is cool. I didn't. I mean, this is useful information for anybody who's looking to get into this stuff.
and I'm sure I'm going to get an opportunity to plug it because if I do get that panel, and I'm just going to say it, I will be live streaming it on one of my social media networks, for lack of a
Okay.
better word, or on social media, I should say. And so you can watch it for free and learn all about it if I get it. But yeah, it's just such a cool thing, and they're a really interesting company because they started out in 1998, and then in 2004, 2003, 2004, it was sold to somebody else who really modernized the Pop Funko. But Funko makes everything.
Right.
Funko doesn't just make Pop Funkos; they make a lot of other toys. And if you've been collecting toys or picked anything up in any fashion, Funko, there's a good chance Funko made it. Pretty much anything minus Hot Wheels cars and Barbies. Funko probably had a hand in it. It's one of the most licensing companies out there.
Right. So aside from toys, comics, as far as speculation, we can stay on the subject of speculation, I guess. I like to invest my money into stuff that interests me. I try to put my money into stocks, and I couldn't pay attention to that shit because that shit's boring. So I put my money now into weed stocks, or I put my money into comic books and that type of stuff. So we can stick with speculation. Other than comic books and toys, are there any other, um, other types of speculations within pop culture and comics and that sort of thing that you have been kind of keeping your finger on the pulse to?
It's crazy. It's. I'll just be honest. I actually take the money that I make from my Pop Funkos and I put it into the S&P 500. So that's not exactly pop culture related, but you know, yeah, I'm not really big into stuff. I mean, I collect some Hot Wheels cars, which are always fun, and but that's more of a hobby person because I've been collecting Hot Wheels cars since I was like 13, all in the nice package, and they're rare ones, and they're ones that fetch money, and it's always fun to find a car for $1, and then that car could be worth $30. I
Right.
have a funny story. When I was like 13, Kmart had a big event where they had a Hot Wheels event where you got like a free poster, and they had all these bins of Hot Wheels cars in the package and everything. And I was a collector, and so I'm just digging through stuff, and then there's like all these older men who are like 35, and there's something called the treasure hunt. A treasure hunt is a rare car, and it's part of a series, and they're more limited, and they're snuck into regular things, and it says T Hunt on it. And so I pick it up, and I just found out. I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is a treasure hunt. Sweet. I put it in my bin, and then these two older men come up to me and say, "That's a good find, man. That's a good find. I'm jealous of you." And then and so you have two 40-year-old men saying, "Oh, that's a good find. That's a good find." And so, but I've taken a break from it a little bit, and then also I used to invest in Lego minifigs. So I don't know if Lego minifigs, if everybody's familiar, but Lego has these figurines that came in a pack, and they originally $2. And the first two sets were you could actually pick the barcode of what they were, and you could actually figure out what they were. And so I have all these unopened minifigs from set one, and so like I have an unopened cheerleader, and so I used to sell those. And back maybe 10 years ago, like an unopened cheerleader was like worth $18. So I bought like five of them, and I sold them on eBay for that. So, and then occasionally I'll pick up some Lego stuff, and I'll hold on to some Lego sets that I know are going to be worth money, but not really big into that. And then I'm a big Pokemon fan and a big Magic the Gathering fan. So occasionally I'll pick up a pack or two, and sometimes you get a legendary card, and those legendary cards could be worth like 15, 16 bucks, and I'll flip them. But yeah, my big thing is, as far as pop culture, a lot of comic book stuff, a lot of pop Funkos, and then also I might. And then back in the day, I also bought like these miniature Green Lantern statues
Oh,
that are
nice.
still in their pack that are the 1/4 scale, and they're going for a good amount of money. So I'll flip that eventually, and I have a price in mind, but I don't want to talk about the price just yet because I have to do my research on it. But
Gotcha.
yeah, that my big thing is comic books and pop Funkos. Is where my pop culture money goes beyond stocks.
So I'm going to be going to, what is it, Oregon, the Portland Comic Con coming up here shortly next month. And one of my favorite things to do when I go to cons is take edibles, get like pretty stoned, and look at cosplay costumes, because I'm not creative in that way at all. Do you cosplay, or are you just a fan?
I cosplayed twice. I was
You've done it
Amuro
twice.
Ray. I was Amuro Ray. I did it twice. Not really my thing. I'm about 20 pounds overweight. I'm not very confident. I have a walking disability, so I have a hard time walking. I'm on crutches, and yeah, it doesn't flow. Like I can't explain. Like I feel weird. Like I always felt weird. Like I felt normal on Halloween dressing up,
Right.
but beyond that, like I just feel weird. It's like it's so weird for me, and also it's like the cosplay culture has become a little bit too harsh for me.
Okay.
Like I feel like it's artificial. Like I feel like a lot of it is just so artificial, where girls just like want to show off their tits,
Right.
and and it's like I feel like guy cosplayers aren't artificial. And don't get me wrong, like I love cosplay, and if a girl wants to show off her body and she's smoking hot, I mean I'm a man, I'm a straight man. I think
Right.
that's hot as fuck. Don't get me wrong, but I also think it's become very fake, and I think it's become very toxic. And over the last 15 years, I've been attending cons. I've just seen that transition where it's gone from really being artistic and what I view as being respectful and showing off your body, but not being softcore porn, to being softcore porn. And hey, and I feel like nobody's owning up to it. And I also feel like cons are not. They're going in that direction. They're going in a direction of being deviant, while not also keeping the integrity of the con and what the con was originally meant for.
Right.
Because Comic Cons were not meant for a girl to show off her ass and her tits, as much as I like that, and I'm not complaining about that, but they were meant for nerds to go and speak about comics.
Right.
And now I feel like it's transitioned to being corporate and that versus being about comics, and I feel like it takes away. And but things change, and I'm very torn on it because on the one part I enjoy it, and I'm sure you enjoy it too, and it must be a blast to eat an edible and be like, oh my god, she's smoking hot, holy fucking shit,
Right.
like, and that's fun, and I agree, and it's really cool to see things, and it's a fun environment, but it's also like it is artificial, and a lot of like I interview cosplayers, and I'm sure some of them are not going to be thrilled that I'm talking about it like this, but it is. I feel like a part of it has become artificial, and also it's also gone into this lewd environment where there are a lot of cosplayers who, and a bunch of them have said it on my podcast, where they have to do lewds, or they have to show their tits, or they have a Patreon where it's a lewd set and it's etchy, for lack of a better word,
Right.
in order to fund their cosplays. And if you go on Instagram, you look at a bunch of cosplays. How many of them are PG? And how many PG cosplayers are out there that have a following of 30,000 people or 1.2 million people? Jessica Nigiri has, I think, 3.2 million, fans on Instagram, but every picture is her in a tiny bikini.
Right.
And so I feel like it doesn't help the industry. It helps her, and it doesn't help cosplay. I think it does help cosplay to some degree, but it also hurts it, and it also hurts the other industry. Like, I feel like it's not raising everything up.
Right. So it's
raising
kind
one
of,
section up.
yeah, it's more of like bringing more people who wouldn't necessarily go to a con or something, to try to get some more money out of it. It's basically a cash grab, is what you're saying.
It's a cash grab, and it brings fans in, and it brings people in, but then to a con, and people are happy, and that money trickles around. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I don't think that it actually overall boosts comics. I actually don't think it boosts anything, and I think it's very problem. And Dave Dorman has spoke about this, and other people have as well, where a cosplayer actually takes money away from artists. And I'm not even talking about a cosplayer who's a guest there. I'm just talking about a cosplayer walking around because people want to take a photo, and then they're not looking at the art, or they're actually not buying anything in the dealer's room. And that happens a lot more frequently than not. So it's very problematic because, on the one hand, it brings people in, but it also doesn't. And look, if you have 1,000 people being brought in, or if Jessica Nigiri is a guest there, so there's two distinctions. There's fans who are cosplaying, and then there's guests. So you have a cosplay guest that sells tickets, and that's good for everything. But then when people cosplay, people take photos of them, and that's all they're doing. And that actually is what hollows out an industry in many ways. And so it's very complicated, and I'm very torn on it because on the one hand, I do like attractive females. But on the other hand, I also want an industry to thrive, and I want these people to eat, and I also want to eat because I present panels at cons, and that affects me, and I'm not getting paid for it, but that affects people who attend my panel.
Right.
And this is how you hollow out an industry. And there's other things that also hollow out an industry, but this is how you hollow out the con side of things.
So I want to talk a little bit about, since we're talking about kind of the changes in the comic book industry. One of the big things these days, especially with how big Endgame was and Infinity War, is taking superheroes and putting them in wherever. There's The Boys on Amazon. There's Watchmen coming out. There's every iteration of superheroes that you can really think of that's coming out these days. So with that being said, are you excited about that stuff? Do you think that it's an oversaturation? Or, I mean, there's been comic book movies and TV shows forever, but I feel like now more than ever, they're just kind of in your face. I mean, I love The Boys. I thought that I'd take more of The Boys any day of the week because it was amazing. So I'm not complaining, but I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts.
So I haven't seen The Boys yet. It's
Check
on
it
my
out. It's
to-do
amazing.
list. It looks awesome. I've seen the trailer. It looks great. It's just haven't gotten around to it, so I'm going to be honest. but opposed to me lying, of course. But there's all these comic movie stuff coming out, and I think it's good as far as for Disney, for their stock, it's good. They make a lot of money, but movies don't translate to comics. So the boys will sell more boys comics. I guarantee you that. That's an easy translation. But as far as the DCU and Marvel's movies, they actually don't sell more comics. And you get an initial little boost, but then it kind of trickles off because people who want to read comic books are not the same people who go see the movies. People who read the comic books of Iron Man will go see Endgame, or read Avengers will go see the Avengers. But then you have a bunch of 7-year-olds who never read an Avengers comic. They might have watched an Avengers cartoon, and they know who Captain America is. They'll go see the movie and they'll go, "Oh man, that was awesome. That's Captain America. That's Iron Man. Oh, that's what this looks like." And then they wait for the next thing to come out. So I think it's good, the fact that they're going to keep on producing these characters because they want the intellectual property, and that they're going to do comic books of them. And so that's good. But it doesn't really help the comic world. And I think what's starting to happen is that we're going to get stuff like The Boys, or we're going to get stuff like Happy that just came out, or Deadly Class, or Umbrella Academy, or Chronicles. I forget which it is. I think it's Umbrella Academy. And we're getting more stuff like that because I think a lot of people who are real fans want that stuff more. And so I think that's the positive out of the comic world. I think these movies are just, I think they're good. They make a lot of money. They get a lot of people excited, but they don't help the comic industry. First thing, stuff like Deadly Class, Umbrella Academy, Happy, The Boys actually sell comics. Preacher, sells comics. The Walking Dead show actually sells comics, and it gets a lot of people in. But even then, you have a real big discrepancy. So I have a panel called Exploring Dystopia Through Attack on Titan, The Walking Dead, and Fahrenheit 451. And I always ask the question I ask, before, because I do like, kind of crowd, I guess, riffing with the crowd, trying to get them on my side. I say, how many people have read the Walking Dead comic? How many people have watched Attack on Titan? How many people read Attack on Titan? It's a manga, it's an anime. And I say, how many people read Fahrenheit 451? So I have an idea of my audience. And a lot of people in that audience haven't read The Walking Dead. They've seen the show. The show is similar to the comic, but it's not the comic. Right. And so that's kind of what people's perception of comics are. But it's good that it's mainstream, because that means that comics are less of a foreign thing now. When a comic book like The Walking Dead becomes a TV show, it becomes less foreign. It becomes more normal. But when that happens, now what you have is that you have a bunch of people. You have almost like fake people in it, where you don't have real comic fans. And this is the thing about con culture. We're going to go back to it, where that's what the con scene has become. It's become very much a mixture. Because of this, because of all these movies, and because of all these TV shows, you have people who like Happy but haven't read Happy, or like The Walking Dead but haven't read The Walking Dead. And so that's why it's like, this is how you hollow out a con. There's a lot of ways the con scene is being hollowed out. And these movies and these TV shows aren't bringing in new fans to the comic world. And what I mean by the comic world is, I mean the actual physical books, or the digital side of it, which is how people are reading. Rather, they're introducing these people to these characters, but not their actual pages in the books that made these characters, if that makes any sense.
No, I got you. So since we're on the subject of like the movies and the Marvel stuff, the big news this past week was Sony and their Spider-Man news, that Spider-Man was no longer in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What are your thoughts on that? Because that's kind of a big. I mean, they built their whole Endgame movie around, Tony Stark and passing the mantle to Spider-Man. Spoiler alert. So, if you haven't seen Endgame at this point, I don't know what the fuck you're doing. But anyway, so yeah, so I just am kind of wondering what you think about that. I know it was big news this week, so there's not too much comic book news this week.
The title of Troll has been passed down from Milo Yiannopoulos to Sony.
That's funny.
That's the meme
Right.
of the century.
Right.
They just trolled Disney, and they owned Disney, and it's brilliant. I mean, it's the funniest thing. I love it. I think it's hilarious. I can't wait for Koch Industries to buy Sony and buy SpiderMan just to tease Disney. Because I just found out, speaking of Charles Koch, he passed away. Koch Industries is bigger than Disney. I just found that out, which is insane.
Oh, I believe that.
From a revenue position, they're bigger. But in all seriousness, the funniest thing, I just thought it was hilarious. I mean, I like it. I think it's funny. I think it's I have like, you know what it is? I'm just so sick of Disney owning everything and
Yeah.
them doing everything, and it's nice to see a company's just like owning them and saying, "Hell no, we don't like that." Because the whole thing, from my understanding, is that Disney wanted a bigger cut going forward, and Sony
Yeah,
was
they
like,
wanted like they were getting 5%, and I guess they wanted to put 50% down too on future movies. So they would put 50% up, but they would also split it 50-50. That was my understanding.
and I just love the fact that they just said, "Fuck no." Like, I'm sorry, but I thought it was funny. I think it's enjoyable. I like the little guy. I'm a small podcast. I don't have any ads on my podcast. I get maybe 200 views, and it's always like on my podcast. And it's always nice when David beats Goliath. And I'm not saying Sony is David, but in many ways Disney is a monster. They are Goliath, and it's nice when they kick Disney's ass. It's refreshing. And I don't know how to say that any other way except the fact that it's so refreshing when a company says, "Fuck off.
Right.
We don't give a shit that you've done A, B, C, and D, and that you built this all around, and that you've invested billions of dollars," because that's what they've invested in reality. And they're like, "Fuck off. We don't care that you own Hulu. We don't care that you're doing this Marvel Plus stuff. We don't care that you have Moon Knight. We don't care. We have Spider-Man, and you don't. And guess what? You made 5 movies, and you should have behaved." It's so refreshing. It is so refreshing. And you know what it is? They got a point, and I think they made the right move, because Into the Spider-Verse was done by Sony. Great movie. Amazing.
It was amazing.
Probably better than both Spider-Mans that came out with Tom Holland. Honestly.
Yeah, it was really good.
And then they're gonna make a sequel, and I think they're making one with all the females. And there's gonna be one with all the females, so Spider-Woman and probably Black Cat will be in there, and a lot of fun stuff with that, because I think they own a bunch of that stuff too. I think they own like the entire Spider-Man concept, which means that they probably own Spider-Gwen or whatever she's called now, and they own Spider-Woman, and probably they own Black Cat, because I think they must own a bunch of the property of that. And so that's great. And so if they're going in that direction, then this makes complete sense, because I don't know what Spider-Man's worth, but it's got to be worth at least $1 billion.
Yeah, it's got to be up there.
Brilliant. And I love it, and I love it, and I love it, because I think but in reality, here's what I think is going to happen. I think that they're going to negotiate this out, because there's too much money at stake. I think what's going to happen is that they're going to put 50% down, and I think Disney's going to take like 20% instead of 5%. And I think that's what's going to ultimately happen, and Sony's going to get more money out of it, and there's going to be benchmark guarantees, and probably that's the best case scenario for Disney. And ultimately, but also it's like all these fans are all upset saying, "Oh, Sony, you're the bad guy." And I'm like, what happened in America where a company stood up to a giant and actually said no, And isn't that like an American thing to do? What Sony
Right.
just did? Like, I'm sorry, like I hate to be political, but isn't that what we used to do in America? Like, Sony's America and Disney's China. Like
Right.
that's the whole entire point here. And so I love it. I love it. I think it's patriotic. And God bless Sony.
So you don't think that Marvel will just use their new What If show to say fuck you to Sony and just do What If Spider-Man was never in the cinematic universe? I know they can't do that because they can't
I
mention
don't
them,
think they can. I don't think they can. I
Right.
mean,
It'd be funny though if they
if
were just like, well, we have this What If show. What if Spider-Man's not going to be here anymore? Sorry, but yeah, probably
they
won't
might
ever
they
happen.
might they might take shots at it. They might enjoy it. They
Right.
might find it fun to do it, but they'll pay for it. Oh, they might just say, "Fuck it, fine, sue us in court," and
Right.
they'll lose. But Disney doesn't care. So they'll pay Sony $500 million just to stick up their middle finger at them. I mean, I think, and I'm okay with that too. I think it's great, but I don't think they're going to do that. And the reason why they're not going to do that is that they're going to try to negotiate this out for the next 2 years. And so, because too much has been invested in this. But I just think it's so American what Sony did. And I hope Sony just says, fuck off. And says, bring it on. We own Funimation.
Right.
Sony owns Funimation. So what I really want is I want a Japanese Spider-Man.
Oh, there you
I
go.
think I think that's what we should do. They should just Japanese Spider-Man anime wise and have fun with it and go to town. And I think it'll be great. I mean, Stanley's daughter's all pissed off about it too,
Yeah, I
and
saw
it's
something
like,
where she was not happy with Marvel, but who knows? You never know.
but you know what is Stanley never owned Spider-Man.
Right.
It wasn't that way. Much like Superman was never owned by Schuster and Siegel, and it's like, what is she bitching about? Because your dad legitly made hundreds of millions of dollars off of Spider-Man.
Right.
I mean, your dad was taken care of. Okay?
Exactly.
You know who wasn't taken care of? Joe Schuster and Jerry Siegel were not taken care of the proper way. They didn't make hundreds of millions of dollars off of their character Superman, and you could argue that Superman's bigger than Spider-Man
Yeah, you
by
can make that
far.
argument for sure.
Spider-Man's one of us as far as humanity. Superman is the best of us.
Right.
So,
So I wanted
so
to swinging back to anime before I got to start wrapping it up here shortly, but new He-Man Masters of the Universe done. I've read as an anime with Kevin Smith as the showrunner. How do you feel about that? Were you a Masters of the Universe fan growing up?
I enjoyed Masters of the Universe, but it was a little bit before my time. So I caught it in the reruns when it was out, and then I caught like the remaster of it. And I enjoy Masters of the Universe. I think it's just interesting and it's enjoyable.
What do you think of them doing it as in the style of anime?
See, that's where things get tricky because if it's done right, then yeah, it makes complete sense. So if it's done like Witchblade or Witch Hunter, I think it's Witch Hunter or Korra or Avatar: The Last Airbender or Ruby, then it's great. It makes complete sense. But if they fuck it up, it's horrific.
Right.
And American anime is very tricky. And it's a tricky topic because done right, it's really good. But if it's not done right, it's not a cartoon. And so you have it like I have to wait to see how the verdict goes because done right, great. You said Kevin Smith is the showrunner on it.
Yeah, Kevin Smith's the showrunner.
He's good at things. I like him. I've enjoyed everything that he's done so far. Red State is one of my favorite movies of all time.
I still haven't seen that, but I heard it's really good.
It's not what you would typically think of him. He was very instrumental in Good Will Hunting, which is also really a fantastic movie. And he was an executive producer on that. So everything the guy touches, for the most part, is great and is funny and is interesting and he knows his way around on how to direct. I mean, he directed a bunch of comic stuff, live action, I think for Supergirl.
Yeah, I think he's written some comics too, so he's done some comic runs as far as writing goes too.
But again, it all goes back to really the art and the style, because if you don't know how to animate as a Japanese animator or in that style, then it's going to be a piece of crap. That's going to be a piece of shit.
Right.
And it's going to look really bad. It's going to look like an American went and took an already American thing that is well respected, that people like, and that people enjoyed and people grew up on, and that's, 35 years old, and then you tried to Japanese it up, and then you American Japanesed it up, and now you went from America with a good thing that worked, took it into another style that disrespects that style, and that doesn't work. But if they do it right, it'll work beautifully.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. They're supposed to. The way they're talking about it, they're saying that they're going to keep it as close to the original and almost be like a continuation. So I'm excited to hear those stories. Before we start wrapping it up, do you want to tell people how they can check out your podcast or where they can find anything that you've got going on?
Yeah, so I'll be happy to plug myself. It's what I live for. I love social media. I'm a social media whore. So my Twitter handle is @PopAnimeComics. That is POPANIMECOMICS. My website is popanimecomics.com. Same spelling. My podcast is called the Pop Anime Comics Lounge. That is on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitch Radio, and anywhere else where you listen to your podcasts. I am on 27 plus directories, as well as my Instagram is Pop Anime Comics, and I do have a Facebook page, so feel free to check that out. And the reason why you should follow me / like my Facebook page is when I do go to cons, I do live stream as many panels as I possibly can, and sometimes I have 4 to 7 panels at anime cons on variety of topics, everything from comic book investing 101 all the way up to the godfather of anime, Osamu Tezuka, where we go back to like the 1950s and talk about anime and really his legacy, and then exploring dystopia, underrated military anime, sports and anime, and a variety of other topics. And I'm always adding new things into my plethora, and my Facebook page is free, so you get to witness a 50-minute panel at an anime con for free. It's up for 2 weeks usually. Free, pretty cool. You can't really beat that deal. It's free, and that's the reason why. As well, I put up a bunch of stuff. I put up 5 articles a day, 2 comics, 2 anime, 1 wrestling. My podcast is pushed out. I got 100 episodes of the podcast, as well as some other fun memes and things like that. So, Pop Anime Comics, just Google it. You'll find me. My website has all my links on it, so you can also listen to the podcast on my website. So there you go. That's all my stuff.
Well, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it. It was fun talking to you about, geek culture, comic book stuff, anime, all that stuff. So I've been excited to finally get to talk about this stuff. So we're definitely going to have to do this again. And I look forward to talking to you at some point soon. And it's Pop Anime Comics. If you haven't checked it out, Pop Anime Comics Lounge. Thanks again to Andrew for coming on, and we'll see you guys next week. Peace. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Itty Bitty Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We just uploaded all the episodes of the show onto YouTube, so you can catch us on YouTube, as well as check us out on Instagram, at Itty Bitty Podcast, and then Twitter at Itty Bitty Pcast, online ittybittypodcast.com. And you can check out all the shows right now, available anywhere you get podcasts for free. And we will see you next week. Thanks. Peace.